Hello, good evening, and thank you for joining us. My name is AJ Arenstein, and along with my colleague Nikki Youngblood Giles, who you'll hear from in a little while, we lead Beyond Barnard. Our team supports all students and alumni of the college as they define, pursue, and achieve success in their careers and communities, and we're excited to welcome you to the third installment of Insights, powered by Barnard. Way back in March, what seems like 150 million years ago, Nikki and I were all set to host tonight's guest, Vernā Myers, class of 1982, for a fabulous event with the Alumni Association in Los Angeles. Literally, my bags were packed and I was on the way to the airport. It was set to be part of Beyond Barnard's academic year theme of advancing diversity, equity, and inclusion in the workplace. We were so sad to cancel that conversation due to COVID-19, and so pleased that Insights now provides us a chance to hear Vernā's perspectives on her work and the last 4 months. Some quick housekeeping for tonight's attendees. This event is being recorded and will be shared next week. Attendees will not have microphone or camera access during the event. Attendees' voices, likenesses, and images will not be captured by Barnard College. Written submission of questions may be shared during the Q&A portion of the event. And with that in mind, I want to thank everyone who submitted questions in advance. As always, we'll do our best to get to as many questions as possible. It's my pleasure now, as always, to introduce the 8th president of Barnard, Sian Leah Beilock. President Beilock has led Barnard since 2017. She's one of the world's leading experts on the cognitive science behind choking under pressure and performance anxiety, with a focus on math and science for women and girls. She's the author of 2 critically acclaimed books titled Choke and How the Body Knows Its Mind. Her 2018 TED Talk has been viewed over 2 million times. Please join me in welcoming President Sian Leah Beilock.
Thank you, AJ, and welcome to everyone. It's so great to be here with all of you tonight. Before we begin, I wanted to just take a moment to thank all of my staff who've been working so hard to get ready for the upcoming academic year. I wanted to give a special shout out to Provost Linda Bell and Dean Leslie Greenidge and our entire faculty and staff who've contributed to Barnard's plan for the fall. We know that we've also heard so much from the community, and we're really looking forward to what's going to be a year like no other, but actually really a tremendous year. I'm especially proud and excited that Barnard has stood up to the challenge of COVID-19 in terms of really focusing our curriculum on the times of the day. All of our first years will take part in a new class called Big Problems, Making Sense of 2020. And from their first day on campus, they're going to be challenged to consider how COVID-19 and our country's historical injustices have generated societal, economic, political, and ecological upheavals. We're really going to ask our students to think about the structures of the day, of history, how we make change moving forward. And we're not only going to ask them to think in their classes, we're also going to give them opportunities to do. So in addition to curricular changes for our first year students and many of the faculty focusing all of their classes on the current times, we have a new initiative called Third Space at Barnard, where students are actually going to be paired with practitioners in the arts, in theater, and government who are working to affect change in their local communities. Students will get to chip in, lend a hand, think about how they produce and affect change of their own, and we couldn't be more excited for that to happen. It's going to be a challenging year. It will be an unprecedented year, but this is what Barnard does best. Barnard women stand up to challenges. We think about how we can affect change, and we move to do it, and I can't wait to see what we accomplish in the coming years. So with that, I want to turn to a great example of a Barnard alumna who has really affected change across her industry. And it's such a pleasure to have Vernā Myers here with us tonight. Vernā is Netflix inaugural Vice President of Inclusion Strategy. And when I told my 9-year-old daughter, Sarah, that I was going to be talking to one of the leaders of Netflix, her jaw dropped and she asked how she could get a job there. So we might have to talk about that later, Vernā. But in this role, she guides the interrogation of cultural diversity, inclusion, and equality into all aspects of Netflix operation worldwide. During her tenure, Netflix launched Strong Black Lead, to call attention to projects with African Americans in key roles. And in June 2020, Netflix committed to shifting as much as $100 million to lenders that serve the Black community, making it the largest company yet to pledge cash to historically underfunded financial institutions. Vernā is also founder and principal of the Vernā Myers Company, which has advised major corporations on removing barriers based on race, ethnicity, gender, and sexual orientation in the workplace. She's a graduate of Harvard Law School and has been working in the space of diversity, equity, and inclusion throughout her career, beginning in 1992 when she started advising law firms about the recruitment and retention of attorneys of color as the first executive director of the Boston Law Firm Group. In 2009, she was recognized as one of the Network Journal's 25 influential Black women in business and the Massachusetts Lawyers Weekly's Diversity Heroes. She's the author of 2 books, Moving Diversity Forward, How to Go from Well-Meaning to Well-Being, and What If I Say the Wrong Thing? 25 Habits for Culturally Effective People. Vernā studied political science at Barnard and graduated magna cum laude, and she was a recipient of the Phoebe Morrison Prize in Political Science. Vernā, I'm delighted to welcome you to our Insights series.
Hi, how are you?
I'm great. I already told you this as we shared a moment before, but I love your sweatshirt.
I wore this in honor of my teammates. So many of my teammates have reached out to me. It's just been so lovely. And I'm like, I'm going to wear my shirt. I still have my shirt. I don't know if everyone else still has their sweatshirt, but this is mine.
It's fantastic. So how are you doing? I'd love to start just with that basic question, which I don't think we ask people enough.
On the real, it's been a thing. My new phrase is it's a lot. It's a lot. And it's all supposed, that phrase really suggests like there are so many aspects of this where I'm just so grateful. There's so many things in my life. My family is good. I am good. I work for a fabulous company. My company is good. Like there's so many wonderful positive things existing right alongside of a lot of stress, a lot of upset, an enormous amount of work, concern, for others who may not be having this kind of existence that I have. And, one of the things that COVID has done for me, especially as a inclusion professional, is to really lay bare so much of the disparities that we know are there, but then it just is so obvious, and that's very difficult to understand. And then also just working with your colleagues, and each of your colleagues having a very different experience with this based on like, do they live with their family, or do they have children, or do they have a existing condition, or, is their family safe, or did someone in their family lose their business? And, so there's just so many ways. Also folks who had mental health concerns and the impact that this has had on them. And so it's been really a lot, if I'm honest, and I'm grateful at the same time.
It's interesting being in a work environment from home, which I think you are right now. It's almost as if some of the barriers between what happens personally and what happens in your work life are just gone, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and in some ways it can be very helpful because it humanizes people. I think we always pretended that like these were separate areas, but that wasn't always true. I mean, I'm not sure that was true, but we learned to kind of keep them separate. And so there's some real positive aspects of really integrating our lives. And then also they're just the struggles that come along with it as well.
Yeah, and I think that's especially true for women who often are sort of try in the workplace to separate being primary caregivers for their kids or for their parents. My 9-year-old just walked in right now about to ask me a question, and I told her I was on a very important call.
Oh, Kelsey, she's so cute, right?
She is a future basketball star, I think, or she's aspiring to be. So let's talk about your role at Netflix. This is an inaugural position, a position of inclusion at Netflix, and I'd love to hear about the lens you take in the position. And it's not only a position that I know is affecting change at Netflix, but it's a position and the work that you're doing that is affecting the whole entertainment industry. How do you think about that?
Well, you know what? Before Black Lives Matter, I would have answered this question very differently. You know, now that it has come and it has somehow awoken so many of us, and things that were obvious to many are now obvious to a lot more, is that I realized that when you are approaching an institution, and most organizations in our society, especially in the US world, basically you're walking into an organization that is at the status quo. What I mean by that is that you are walking into an environment that has been shaped by racism, right? And so this idea of neutrality, like we have these neutral organizations, no, it's not true, right? Neutral means status quo, and the status quo is racism. And that is a new understanding about what it is that we're actually trying to do. We used to say that we were doing like a cultural change process, and we are. And I think we are starting to really be okay with acknowledging that it's unlikely that a number of these organizations, not all, but many, especially those who that have been in place for a long time, or those who are at the top of the game, is that they were created by a group of people who were in many cases monocultural. And so they created something that worked for them. And as we all do, or I shouldn't say that, many of us have learned how important it is that when we shape things, that we're thoughtful about larger groups of people and the differences. So that's one thing I would say has kind of shifted in the last 6 weeks, that I get to say words like racism and anti-racism and institutionalized racism. Like, those are words that were not in the corporate space, right? We talked about bias, but we wouldn't actually talk about institutional dominance by a certain group of people or power, right? So that's one thing. One of the other things I would say is that the lens has to be, and it's in my title, which is I really asked to have strategy added to my title, because I want people to recognize that this is a long-term strategic approach. And that means that we didn't get here overnight, and we're not going to get out of this overnight, right? And also that it's not about a bunch of activities. So that was something that a lot of times people are like, oh, we talked about our holidays and that we had great food, and all of that is good. But what we are starting to recognize is we have to look at strategies that allow us to evaluate systems and culture and make the shifts necessary so that they are actually creating an environment where people of all backgrounds can thrive. I think the other lens that we've learned over a period of time, and I'm grateful that I've been part of that, is to help people understand the difference between representation, or what we used to call diversity, and inclusion, and how we've done a lot to try to bring people into institutions, but haven't had either the awareness or the courage or the commitment to do what is necessary to create an environment where people feel, I would say, expected and reflected and respected. Like that sense of belonging, psychological safety, all of that is an enormous amount of work.
And it really goes back, I like what you talked about with strategy, to the structure of an institution, right? And I think that's something we've been thinking a lot about at Barnard, just the structure of institutions of higher education and who they were made for and what that meant in terms of who was there and how it's reflected now. And as a cognitive scientist, I think a lot about this idea of cognitive load, right? It's exhausting to be in a place where you're having to navigate in a way that is not set up for you, or where you're worried about what others will think about you. And it actually drains your brain power to focus. And I mean, at Barnard, we want students to have all their brain power because we're trying to get them to change the world. So how do you set up structures so they're not depleted in that way?
And this is the upside. While it's really hard, the upside of an institution having the commitment to do this is that they're going to unleash all sorts of new ideas and possibilities, and people can thrive, and that actually adds to what you're ultimately trying to do. So there is like a lot of good side to the work, and people have to be willing to do it. And I think my experience is that a lot of institutions have said they were committed, but now they're really got to ask themselves that question, because a lot of people want difference, but they don't want to do anything differently, right? And so now we're really saying to people, no, I don't think that's going to work. And the reason why I think it's important for people to think about it is because so many times people are like, well, we've been doing diversity, and like, why hasn't anything changed? Right? Like, we're really good people, and things haven't changed. And this is what we're saying. We were like, you're going to have to let the innovation begin.
Yeah. And that's oftentimes uncomfortable. And I think that's really hard. I mean, we as humans like to be in situations where we feel comfortable, right? It's one of the reasons oftentimes if students, for example, are told they're not math people, they don't want to take math classes, right? So it's the wrong thing to say. But being uncomfortable helps you learn. It's something we talk a lot about in the classroom. So how do you get people to feel okay with being uncomfortable to make the changes that you're talking about?
Such a good question, but I have to ask you, do you still have a situation where you don't have to take math, or now do you have to take math?
Everyone takes some math, whether it's stats or others. And my research is around success in math and science. And there's so much work showing that if you realize that math is something you can learn with practice, then you often do much better.
Right, because I feel like, I picked Barnard because it was a fabulous school, and it was, but a part of it was the fact that I didn't have to do math.
But you can't say that anymore.
I can't do that anymore.
Well, a third of our graduates are math and science majors now. And I've heard from so many students who've said, I didn't think I could do math. I wasn't good at math. And they came to Barnard, they took a stats class, which is math, but it's thinking about it in a way that applies maybe to your research, and it opens them up. And so I think oftentimes we're missing a population of people who can be successful in all sorts of ways because of these preconceived notions that others put on them or society. And then you reflect it in yourself.
Yeah, the bias that they encounter when they try to make some of those efforts, right? So on the comfort thing, I've been talking about this for a while. And one of the things that I think one needs to recognize around comfort is that you're not going to be comfortable before you're uncomfortable. Right? So if you think that somehow you could get to the comfort thing without going through the uncomfort thing, I just am here to just say that's not going to happen. But the upside of walking through the discomfort is, one, you have more confidence, you feel better about yourself, and you're useful. Right? So, and what I mean by useful is that now you are in a place to actually be the person who you hoped you were, but you really weren't because you were not willing to be uncomfortable. So there is that work that you do that then helps you, your behavior, your beliefs, and everything to line up with yourself, your sense of self. Because if I've ever seen anything prevent us from doing work, it's because people have a sense of themselves as being good people. And as a good person, they couldn't possibly be biased. They couldn't possibly be racist or sexist or whatever. And so they're so concerned about keeping that in place that they won't venture out to figure it out. So I just want to say that there's such good outcomes to going through the discomfort in order to get to something that feels more like a flow. You are still always going to have a group. I mean, I still am learning a lot about gender identity. Sometimes I'm like, ooh, did I get the pronoun wrong? Did I do that right? Whatever. Or it might be around disability and so forth. But I now have done enough of the moving through the incompetence stage, or at least the ignorance stage, that I know that I need to do something in order to get to more competence.
I think you're a psychologist. You're talking about these ideas of self-concept, right? And how you have to really adjust your idea of self-concept, which can be a hard thing to do. to have action, and how you have to practice doing things that are uncomfortable to make that change. So it's great to hear that. I think it's something we often talk about with our students. It's okay to fail. It's okay to take a step in the wrong direction. At Barnard, we have these amazing young women who usually haven't failed at much of what they've done throughout their life. And now, it's time to learn how to fail, because we're going to all fail in different things that we do.
I remember like my English class, and I didn't fail, but to me getting a B+ was a fail.
Right. I think that's what a lot of our students think about as fail.
But the thing that I thought was really interesting is that I decided, and this could actually make me cry, but I'm going to try not to be. I decided that therefore I shouldn't be a writer. Right? In my freshman, I went to Barnard because I wanted to be a writer. And I didn't seem to be able to make my teacher happy with what I was doing. And so then I decided that this is not something I should do. And then also I was like, who are you kidding? You're like this working class kid from Baltimore. You're not going to make enough money. People put all this sacrifice into you. What you need to do is you need to get a real job, which ultimately got me to law school, which ultimately got me to the law firms, which ultimately made this is not the right use of me, right? And then I got over it, and I wrote 2 books, and I love writing, So I do want to say that to folks who are thinking about, even now, it depends on even where you are in your profession right now, is that some of us are stuck. Like we feel like there are no options. We got to stay here. We got to do this. We got to do that. But something about COVID also is getting people to reassess where they are and what's important and what they care about. And so I just want to encourage people to redo that list, or throw that list out that says, I can't do this, or I'm not sure this is going to work, or I was never really good at that, or my dad always told me that I shouldn't, right? You got to let some of that go so that you can see what is for you.
Yeah, I think that's such great advice. So turning back to Netflix has been a real leader in producing diverse content and bringing content to the table that people wouldn't have seen otherwise. Talk to us about how that happens. How does that come to be? What does it take to do it? I mean, you sit at the intersection of activism and the arts and business. How do you bring that all together to affect change?
I'm figuring it out, like seriously, in real time. But what I will say is I am very proud to be part of this company. I have my own business. I still do, which is kind of awesome because Netflix said that was okay. So I think that is also a brilliant thing that they do, which is to really encourage people to do their best. But one of the reasons why I was willing, because they were my client, and one of the reasons why I was willing to let this go to another place and come into Netflix is because I realized the power of the narrative. And what I realized is, like, I'm preaching to all these folks about how important it is to be open and diverse, and how so much of our biases are single stories, and how we don't allow people to be multidimensional. And it just clicked one day, and I wish I could say that I thought of this about myself, but I didn't. Somebody was talking to me and trying to encourage me, and they're like, this is where it is. This is where you can change the narrative. This is how we interrupt stereotyping. And I was like, oh my gosh, it's the same thing. And so what I have been recognizing, which has been so awesome, and the way my team thinks about it, is that we are trying to give people the lens of inclusion. So no matter what their job is in the company, they're asking themselves internal and external questions. They're asking themselves internally, they're saying, how is my team? And what is the representation on my team? And are people able to speak? And do people feel free to innovate? And what are we missing? And who are we missing? So that's a set of questions really that goes to how we relate as teammates and colleagues, and like how effective we are in our teams. But then the external thing is, what are we producing? What are we putting out in the world? Who do we have in front of the camera and behind the camera? And what kinds of stories haven't been told? And what kinds of stories have we told poorly? Because we still have, because we're part of the system, we still have things on our service where we're just like, colorism seems to be a problem here. It's not a Netflix problem.
Right.
It's an industry problem that somehow we want the lighter skinned people of every race, right? And that's how people think about beauty, right? And so we're looking at that. We're looking at what stories, as I mentioned, haven't been told, who hasn't had the opportunity. And then also, how do we make those stories bigger and deeper and more complex to truly reflect the authenticity of the groups that we're trying to present, right? Or even how do we take a story and think about casting, right? Like why is the family just one race? Because we know we have families that have multiple races. Or why don't we have somewhere a person with a disability in here? Because we know that there are folks who are disabled. So really trying to make what we do reflect the larger world and push against the ways in which exclusion has prevented us from seeing.
So how do you keep that top of mind in a company that has 9,000 people? What sorts of strategies does Netflix impart to do that? What can we learn? I mean, I think it makes sense when we talk about it, but how does that get sort of instantiated and instilled into everything everyone's thinking every day?
Yeah. So again, we're on that journey, and I joined the company in 2018. At the end of the year, there were 4,000 people. There are now not more than 9,000 people. So that doubling has been very interesting, especially because we're now all over the world, and every day we're opening a new office. So it's not just sort of what the US mentality is. It's like thinking about this through the dimensions of other regions, other cultures and languages and so forth, which is the great excitement about Netflix, is that when you see us get seen by like 190 countries, I think we're up to like 100 million views. I mean, it's really powerful. So what that means is, like, my team could never be big enough to walk around and be in every room and say, are you thinking about this? I haven't heard from her. You seem to be, So we just are doing a number of things. We have a lot of learning assets, where some in video, obviously some in person, but now we're like in boxes trying to do. We just did a really awesome training on unconscious bias with our Brazilian, well, actually LATAM, so it was Brazilian and also Mexican and I think Argentinian colleagues were all on. So there's a lot of education necessary, but then again, I'm also part of the talent team. So then we start really looking at, like we said, structures and how do we bias proof and pay attention to what compensation looks like, and when we're giving people feedback, and also just a number when we're hiring, or where are we hiring from, and what kind of questions are we asking? And all of that is also done by the talent acquisition people have to start asking those questions. We have groups called HRBPs. Those are HR business partners that are shaping and really helping leaders. And then we have specific leader-based conversations. We've got talks that we've been doing, especially since COVID. We did a talk on xenophobia. We did a talk on mental health. We did a talk on anti-racism. These are the ways that we try to get people's consciousness up, right, so that at some point it doesn't feel good not to have representation in the room, or it doesn't feel good to just be, oh, we're neutral. We also have employee resource groups that help us sort of elevate sort of voices that we may not be aware of. So all of it is part of it. But I have to tell you, you know, for those who watch Netflix, you know, we put a BLM collection up after the killing of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and Arbery and so forth. And what I am the proudest about, and by the way, the Strong Black Leads was there before I got there, but it has evolved, right? So I wanted to make sure that was clear. But there are so many things that happen in this company that that we don't even do anything about. We don't suggest it. It just happens. When people went up, when our social came up and they said Black Lives Matter, that was folks in marketing, all on their own deciding to do that, right? When we decided what to put up on the service, we already had a collection of at least just 40 things that we could put under that. And we have many more, but we sort of wanted to try to figure out what the best things were. But that was a combination of both our content people and our product people. Right, so our product people are the tech folks, and they figure out how to put this up. We were not. I mean, you know,
I love that.
Here's what's happening, and we're like, awesome. And they're like, you want to look at this list and all that. But it was just so exciting when you don't need inclusion strategy to tell you what to do.
And I think this is something that is like a hallmark of a great leader, is helping to promote other people's good ideas. And when folks feel empowered and you get to sort of stand behind them and help, you know, push it forward, I get so excited when that happens.
Yeah. You know,
that's my favorite part of leading, is supporting other great ideas.
Exactly. The $100 million to Black banks came from a person who is like a director who's in talent acquisition, and he's Black, and he came up with the idea, and they're like, okay, let's run it, right? Let's look at what's possible. And so one of the things I do love about Netflix is that they feel like stories can come from anywhere and be enjoyed by folks everywhere, and they feel that internally about ideas as well. So it really does allow people to start using their perspective, right? Because the whole point of representation is that we need different perspectives, and most of the time those perspectives come from different life experiences and identities, and so it's very powerful to see that unleashed.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting in the psychology and business literature. It's so clear that diverse teams make better decisions. Like, I mean, it's just, you know, for whatever one's motives are in terms of equity, in terms of correcting racism, in terms of changing structures, those motives are supported by this idea that when you have different points of view and different lived experiences at the table, you're going to get better outcomes.
Exactly.
And I think, you know, I'm always surprised when people don't know that research, but it's so clear. And I think that's, you know, something that we really promote at Barnard, is hearing in the classroom, being pushed to think differently. When you have to defend your point of view to someone who doesn't agree with you, whether or not they change their mind, your point of view gets sharper.
Yeah. Yep.
So let's talk about Barnard. We want to hear about your experiences at Barnard, and I'd love to know, you know, what advice you'd give Barnard students who are interested in the work of advancing diversity, equity, and inclusion, and how you thought about that when you were a Barnard student.
Yeah, you know, now that I have the word intersectionality to help me explain my experience, what I would say is, first of all, the longer you stay, the longer you're out of Barnard, the more you adore it, right? So if you had asked me like maybe 2 years, graduating, I was like, I had some issues, whatever. But the older you get, the more you compare, you're just like, wow, I learned so much. So first of all, my teachers were wonderful. They were just, well, I love the political science department. It was everything.
I know some of the faculty are watching, actually.
Oh, I hope so. That's so awesome. I mean, my professors they were so supportive. That's the thing about Barnard. Like, people are clear what the charge is, which is to graduate women who have a sense of confidence and competence and can, take on anything. So, on the gender side of this work, of this experience, it was extremely positive. I was in the Black Women's Organization and so forth, but I was in all sorts of other organizations. And I remember, I don't know which group it was, but we were trying to put together some event, and we needed chairs all set up and stuff. And we all looked at like how big the job was gonna be. And we were like, we could really use some men right now. It would be really good. But then we're like, oh, well. And then we just proceeded to do it and to set it up. And it was awesome. And you get those opportunities to really say, what are you made of? You as a woman. I have to tell you, it's somewhat the same ways I feel about historically Black colleges, is that everybody's for you. People are for you in that identity, and they have people who are committed to you. And so you start to develop a sense of self that was not available to you if you were just out in the world. Now, you can learn this in other colleges. I'm not saying that you can't, but when an entire organization is dedicated to your success around that identity, it's really important. But I would say on the race side of things, it was harder because, first of all, I came from Baltimore, where being Black wasn't like a thing. I didn't know really that I was Black. I mean, I did know I was Black, but I didn't know it mattered. And then I went to like this utopian like high school that was super mixed, and you could do whatever you wanted. And so when I came home, I was in an all Black neighborhood, so felt really safe. When I went out to high school, it was really mixed and you got to do whatever. When I got to Barnard, I was so deeply underrepresented that it was unusual. But because I thought, and I sometimes get mad at my parents about this, that racism was over, right? You're like, oh yeah, that was MLK, we're good now. But then I ran into interactions, both with, I would say, administration and also with colleagues, not so much teachers, but colleagues or, my peers, where I was like, I don't know how to explain this other than I'm Black. Like, what else would explain the differential treatment that I'm getting here? And so I will say that was more of a struggle. And then it's just like there are not a lot of you. And I have a friend who I think is watching, and her name is Janice. And I remember Janice Robinson at the time, it was her. And we would see each other, Sian, from like changing classes. I would be like, there's a Black girl. Who is she? What? And we would like look at each other longingly. We'd be like, we must find each other. And we did, and we're still besties. In addition to that, I think I've also said Suzanne Zimmer, who was Keith at the time, who was the first person I met when I got to Barnard, because we were sitting around trying to figure out what we're supposed to do. And she walks in and she's like, does anybody know what we're doing? And I was like, that's the girl who's going to be my friend, because she's not afraid to say what she doesn't know. And we are besties as well. So, I mean, it was a mixed experience is what I think I'm saying. And I have so many wonderful, powerful lessons from this institution that I have built upon.
It's great to hear. And I think something that a lot of people are interested in is, just as you, in your experiences and now at Netflix, you also navigate relationships among different groups, right? And I know that students on Barnard's campus are involved in groups like Ba'ath or Mujeres or the Muslim Student Association or Hillel, and they advocate for themselves, but also our work to try and understand each other's points of views. And I wanted to ask you a question specifically about this, because I noticed that you just did a Instagram Live about Black and Jewish community relationships. I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about that event, what the impetus for it was, and what lessons learned are there as our students come together to try and navigate across different ideas and really lived experiences.
I put together something that I'm not sure how much it's going to go, but I put together something called Solidarity Sunday. And the reason why I did that is because I'm seeing that fracturing that is so common to movements, where we might have seen it even at the beginning, like with the LGBTQ plus folks and the Black folks. And then I was actually in a march where in LA, they kind of figured out they're like, all Black lives matter, right? So they basically were like, Black people come in all sorts of backgrounds, so we're not going to fight among ourselves. But what I'm seeing is that sometimes when there is a movement that appears to be focused on only one group, I say appears because really the focus is on white supremacy, right? And the focus is on how institutions have been perpetuated and and as a result, and certain power has created disparities that are so deeply embedded in our lives, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so what sometimes people are doing is they're getting worried, like, my thing is important, right? Isn't my thing important? And then there's like the fighting. So there were and also ignorance, unfortunately, comes in every shape and size and group. So what we saw last week were a number of well-known sports figures, entertainment figures who were Black, who were spouting anti-Semitic, just deeply offensive and painful stuff. And someone in my company brought it to my attention because I didn't actually notice it. And he was Black. And he was willing to say out loud, I stand against anti-Semitism. I'm like, I need to do that. I need to figure out how to do that. And I knew that I had some really good friends who do the work on anti-Blackness and on anti-Semitism. And one who was also part Jewish and part Black. And so I invited them on for a conversation, and it was really eye-opening. And more of that has to happen, where we need to use this time, one, to just be aware that this whole plot, and I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but the way white supremacy works is to pit groups against each other. That's right. How it works. And it doesn't, and I often believe this, like, if all the intentional racists stayed home and slept one day, racism would still proceed all day long, alive and well, because it's on automatic. That's why people keep saying you can't be neutral about this. You have to be anti this because the status quo is this. So one of the things that I am really encouraging groups to do is do book talks together, do work together, figure out how to. And I don't mean dismiss history, because there's history, there's a way in which anti-Blackness is at the root of a lot of what has happened in our country, such that people who were not white got to opt into being white. Our Irish brothers and sisters, our Italian brothers and sisters, and in some cases, our Jewish brothers and sisters, right? So how do we pay attention to that and the tensions that have happened? And how do we, for once, not fight over the crumbs, but create an entirely different pie, is where there is enough dignity and respect and equality and opportunity for everyone. And
I love the different pie. I'm going to use that.
Okay, absolutely. Go for it.
Yeah, that's great. So there's so many questions coming in. Everyone's asking questions. So I'm going to ask you some of the questions coming in from our audience members, if you don't mind.
No problem.
So we have one from Diana Cutlow, who you might know. She's saying, I played basketball with Vernā at Barnard. We were still the Bears. And she wants to know whether your sports participation shaped your success or leadership style in any way. And I feel like I would have asked you this question if Diana hadn't. So tell us about that.
Oh my goodness, absolutely. I mean, in so many ways. One is that in a couple of years I was captain, so trying to motivate people, and we're all walk-ons. So we've all come from like all these different backgrounds. We're kind of like a motley crew of people, and trying to get everybody motivated and doing the laps and all that. Also, sometimes we were really good, but because there was a lack of fairness around funding, which we have now, I can still get up on my high horse about that. We did not always have the support we needed in order to be as awesome as we could be. So we lost a lot. Like sometimes we lost by like 40 points. I think Diane was gone by this time, but by that time I was like the center and I was scoring a lot, and I could like score like 30 points and we could still lose by like 40. And so Nancy Calvus was our coach, and she was so good. And I would go into like the shower or something and I would just be crying.
Uh-oh.
And she was like, get it together, Bigger, get it together. So learning how to lose and to still keep coming back was really important. Just camaraderie. And we had so many different types of people on our team, and we learned to work together. And so I think those are just a few of the lessons that I learned.
Yeah, I was a captain of my soccer team, and I remember realizing one day that what motivates me doesn't motivate everyone else. It was sort of this light on as a high school student that different people are led and motivated in different ways, and you have to really work towards them. I think that's something, and I think that's such a fantastic part of being a leader. So we have one from a current student, Cindy Espinoza, who's the class of 22. And she asked a question about you writing your first book. So you talked about being discouraged in your English class, but how did you get up the courage to write your first book? What was the impetus for doing that? What made you put pen to paper in that way?
So after working in this area for a while, you realize you're only as effective as the number of people you can see. As a consultant, you can't see everybody because you're already worn out. And so you're like, how do I have impact? Like, how can I get the message out? And in our culture, it's a lot about the written word. It's almost like, unfortunately, it's like one culture has been, or one way of showing intelligence has been like seen as the better way, which is writing words on a piece of paper. Whereas there are also just really powerful like narrative cultures that do it differently. But in the academia world and in the world that I was in, which is a lot of very prestigious law firms, I needed to put some pen to paper. Now, so you get the idea. I've got some things to say. I need to write a book. Then you have all of these things that happen. I would say I had all these things that happened. Like, who are you? Why would somebody listen to you? What if you're wrong? This could invite critique. You're pretty good right now. Your clients like you. Why are you going to put, like all of that. And then also I had a conversation with a white partner in a law firm that I had befriended. And I was talking to him. And he said, we were talking about cultural appropriation. And he was like, when is it going to be okay for us to use the things that you claim? That's a whole nother workshop as coming and originating from your group. And so we kept going back and forth, and he was like, you should write something. Okay, so now you got all the things that say you should write it, and then you have some things that's like you shouldn't write it. But then a friend comes by, so get a friend who has written a book. And my friend says, I said, can you tell me like what I should be thinking about? She said, really? There are only 2 things you should be thinking about. And I go, what? She goes, sit your ass in the chair and write. And that's what it comes down to a lot. It's like, all these ideas are great. All these little people over here saying, don't do it. All of that is fine. However, you have to sit down and write. And boy, is it beautiful once you get yourself to do that. My dog, I thought he was going to start moving around. He was sleeping, and now he's moving around. Please do not be distracted by him. But yeah, I was like, the joy of putting your thoughts down on a piece of paper and learning from it, learning what you know, learning what you don't know, trying to figure out what would be helpful. Okay, I'm gonna put him out. You can ask the next question. I'll be right back. I'm so sorry.
Oh, go, please. I love this idea of actually, writing as a way to sharpen your own thinking. I think that's something that affects a lot of us. So, good. I was just saying that I think that writing as a way to change your own thinking is really powerful. And I think, a lot of us experience that. For me, knowing, go on.
Sorry, even if you're not trying to publish, see, that's the thing that chases people. They're like, well, I need to have like a publisher, and then what if no one buys this book? For the most part, you don't write a book so that you can get rich, right? You write a book from the motivation of wanting to share. You write a book from the motivation of wanting to know what you know, right? And if you can keep those kinds of motivations front and center, then you don't have the stuff that comes by and like causes you to say, well, maybe I'm not going to write this morning.
Right. Yeah. And it's sort of just sitting down and doing it. You don't have to think about the whole book all at once. I know for me, it helped me sort of write without jargon, without scientific jargon about the brain, because if you're writing for a broad audience, you have to be able, you can't hide behind the jargon. And yes. I think that's so powerful.
I would say one other thing, which get help. You don't have to do stuff by yourself. This has taken me a very long time to figure out. People, when you look at people that you really admire, and you're like, how do they get all of that done? Almost always, they have people helping them. Either it's an editor that's looking at their stuff, or it's somebody who's taking care of their kid, or there's someone who's helping them to have a regular regime, like physical regime, or the right diet. Like, get some help. Don't try to do the lonely only, I'm going to make it all happen by myself thing, because for the most part, it's going to take you too long. You could do it, but it's going to take you too long, and it might cost you too much.
That's great advice. And even I think talking to friends or having them look at your writing or small things, right? So we have a great question from Pamela Chabra Malik, who's class of 01. And I think this is a question a lot of us are asking, and we'd really love to hear your take on it. And so, I guess the question is, as we're in this anti-racism social movement right now, are you optimistic that the change is going to happen, that the urgency that so many people feel is going to be maintained, or is this going to be short-lived? And I'm hoping that you're optimistic, because if you're not optimistic, we're in trouble. But how do we keep the urgency up and the energy up?
A lot of people have been asking me that question. And if I am honest, I am optimistic, but I am an optimistic person. So sometimes I can check that. Here's how we're going to keep it going. Every one of us is going to commit to keep it going. It's not that magical. Really, it's about all the ways that each of us are interrogating our families, our very existence, our institutions. Like when you have like people removing Uncle Ben's picture, and maybe Aunt Jemima's going to come off that box for once, and we now have no Confederate flags in NASCAR, and they're just things that are happening, and they're happening because each person is asking themselves, what should I do? And how can I make a difference? And as long as we have people doing that, this thing is going to keep moving. But if we sink back into our neutrality, or and is it tiring? Yes. But if we do it by ourselves, so we got to find our community. And by the way, all of us are part of some community, right? We may not be seeing them that much with COVID, but maybe it's your religious institution. Maybe it's your kid's school. Maybe it's your sorority. Maybe whatever. There's probably some place where you could make an impact. And when I say impact, it could be something simple as asking a question. Why don't we think about the next time we have an event that we use, that we think about who the vendors are that we're using, and make sure that we are spending money in places that are economically, or communities that have economic disparity. Like, that small thing is a big thing, right? I would also say continuing to learn, and we really have been encouraging people that it's about it's introspection, because a lot of Black folks in particular are just like, I am so tired of telling white people what they need to do. I'm trying to deal with my own sadness and my own drama and so forth. And so what we really need is, if you feel like whatever group you're in, right? Because for me, it might be, I need to focus more on cis, or being cisgender, or maybe being a person with no disabilities or whatever, but get with other people like you to have these conversations and do work on your own. And there's so much literature and there's so many resources. There really is no excuse. And if you're like, yeah, but I can't believe everything I read, there are some folks, like if you're talking about Black folks, and you don't know whether something is safe, I would say use the museum, Smithsonian Museum of African American Cultural Studies, Cultural History. They have a fabulous set of resources. So you can even go to things that are more, I guess it would be mainstream, and find things and keep the learning going. Because today I had a conversation with some of my Jewish colleagues and learned a whole bunch of stuff, right? So I think we are responsible for it continuing. And if you see some people getting a little tired, see if you can help them keep moving it along.
Yeah, I think that's great. And it's one thing we're really focused on at Barnard, is in terms of thinking about lifelong learning, and Beyond Barnard is an example of that. So this has been so great, Vernā. Thank you so much. I have one more question for you. Okay. What are you watching on Netflix right now?
Oh my goodness. It's just so much stuff. I mean, I have spent, this is the thing, when you work for Netflix, you watch a lot of TV. All right, so I've been watching the Michael Jordan Last Dance, because we just got that. We released it in other countries first before it came there. So that's been really interesting. And today, when I was doing push-ups, I was like, you need to channel your Michael Jordan. I've also been watching a number of Mexican, telenovelas that are just so good. I can't even, and there's one out, the Dark Dance or something like that. I also strangely loved, what was the one that was about the Jewish community and a girl who was leaving that Hasidic Jewish.
Unorthodox.
Oh, it was so good, Unorthodox.
Yeah.
I loved that. 13 Reasons Why. It's
so great.
There's just so much to watch, and there's a lot of, unfortunately, I watched that Jeffrey Epstein thing, which just made my blood crawl, right? But there are just so many things, and it's funny because in my company, we always ask that question. I will also say that I am so grateful to hear that you are doing this course for your freshmen.
Really excited.
So awesome.
Yeah.
Because when I think about where people grow, it's only two places really for the most part. It's in school and at work. Those are the areas where not only do people learn, but in a school like Barnard, you get the proximity. You get to be with people who are different from you. So you get to test your presumptions or even become aware that you used to have these assumptions and biases. And I think it's a really important place for people to go and get this information.
Yeah, well, we're so proud to have you as an alumna, and thank you for being here, and we can't wait to see what you do next. And as we close, I'd like to thank everyone for being on and for asking so many great questions. And I would love to ask Dean Youngblood-Giles to come on, who runs Beyond Barnard, and to talk a little bit about this Insight series. So thank you so much, Vernā.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, President Beilock, and thank you again, Vernā Myers, for joining us this evening. On behalf of the entire Beyond Barnard team, I'd like to thank all of you for joining us tonight. Before closing, I'd like to update you on a few things. The second session of Summer Colloquium kicked off just this week. We're looking forward to the next 4 weeks of programming across a range of topics related to your intellectual goals and professional goals. There are events and resources designed for both students and alumni, and we invite you to see the full slate of programs on our website. A great way to keep up with Beyond Barnard this summer and to follow along with the stories of Barnard interns working across industries and institutions is to follow us on Instagram @BeyondBarnard. A reminder, we hope alumni and students alike will also join Barnard Connect at barnardconnect.barnard.edu. There you can not only connect with amazing mentors, but also post and find short-term projects to develop skills and build meaningful relationships this summer. This summer, we've been so happy to serve the students and alumni who relied on Beyond Barnard for advising and support. The job market continues to be challenging, and we want to remind you, as always, that Beyond Barnard is a lifelong resource for alumni. We offer career advising and assessment for alumni in all career stages and industries. And we recently launched a webinar series that specially focuses on navigating different aspects of your career during a crisis. The entire schedule of events is available in the Beyond Barnard section of Barnard's website. I hope that you will join us for our next installment of Insights, powered by Barnard. Until then, have a nice evening and stay safe.